Welcome to today's webinar, Introduction to Individual Giving. And I should introduce myself first. I'm Krista. I am the Equitable Access Strategy Manager here at Candid. And I am so happy to be joining you with my colleague, Erin, who's going to be off camera and off video today, but she is available to help you with any kind of back of the kind of webinar needs. So you'll see her posting. So thank you, Erin, so much for being here. We are Candid, and if you haven't heard about us, we do a lot of things. We actually are an amazingly, fairly new organization that is not new in history and experience. We are Foundation Center and GuideStar that came together as one about 4 years ago. And what we do is we help you do your job, and we do that through trainings and webinars like this today. We have a really big research team that's doing a lot of work understanding our sector, kind of where the money comes from and where it goes, and then, figuring out why it matters to our society and the kind of world in general. We have a lot of collaborations with partners around the country. So we've got resources for you, hopefully no matter where you're joining us from. And our mission is to help you be more successful at your work and do the important work that you're doing. So first, thank you so much for being here with us today and continuing to do the work that you do. We love being able to work with you. And we also have a partnership with the Fundraising Academy for some of this curriculum and content today. So we wanted to just say thank you to them, but also the design of this deck is a little bit collaborative. And so for someone that, loves things to look pretty, you'll see a couple different colors throughout this deck. And you'll see that we're grateful to be able to provide some other content to you because of some of our partnerships. One of the other important jobs that I get to do as a trainer and educator is make sure that you have learning outcomes at the end of this time together. So our goal is that by the end of this hour plus together, you'll be able to explain the importance of individual giving in your nonprofit's fundraising strategy. You'll also be able to identify those key steps for a successful individual giving program. And then I'm going to give you some resources and kind of walk you through how to potentially start drafting and or improving your annual individual giving program, because you all might be at different stages of that. This is very much of an intro course for us, and we kind of keep intro content at a very specific kind of like broad level. But I've had a lot of years of experience, not only fundraising and doing individual donor relations, but also being a philanthropy consultant and now adjunct professor and educator with Candid. So I try to stay as up to date and ask other practitioners what is working out there in the world. So I have, I think, a pretty broad enough background that I should be able to answer some of your other, don't stump me too hard, but some of your other questions today. So feel free to keep them coming. I like to start this workshop to kind of have a few definitions here. We also have a resource for you. I'm going to probably give you more than you're probably ready to receive, but one of them is a whole glossary on just definitions for the fundraising space, because a lot of times we can use certain words in our organizations that might mean different things in other sectors. But when I refer to a fundraising program, what we're talking about is your organization or institution's strategy and tactics, right? And then ultimately objectives in order to really, for an organization, meet your need and your case for support. Sometimes that also builds into having a campaign that is also loosely defined in terms of a time frame or specific funding opportunities. And you can see down below, a campaign is going to be more defined as like an organized effort to raise fund for your nonprofit. There's a lot of different campaigns out there in the words for that. But when we say fundraising program, that's what we mean, that it's really got a strategy combined with a specific tactics on how you're going to meet those objectives to fundraise for your organization. We all could wake up today and say, we need to fundraise. We're a nonprofit. Yep. That's not a plan. The fundraising program helps build these plans and activities into it. Annual giving, I'll talk a little bit about that today. Annual giving is when specific donors, the same funder, the same donors is repeating their gift It's a program that you're asking for a repeat gift. This is when we seek funds on an annual or recurring basis from that's the constituency, the donor, the funder, and we generally use this income from the annual giving for operating support, okay? So that's why it's not necessarily saying, oh, this money is going to Krista's salary, but this money is going to really fuel and power the organization to do its mission. And then when we talk about major gifts, that's going to be more of a significant amount, right? This size can vary. Everyone might have a different major gift amount for your organization, but this may or may not be repeated. This might be something that's very strategic and special. And often major gifts are given specifically from individuals in addition to their regular annual giving. So often we need to do a little more planning before we're ready for actually a major gifts program. But that major gifts program, all of your campaigns throughout the year and your annual giving, all are strategies that fall under your fundraising program. So let's give a little bit of context to what we're talking about here when we think about the nonprofit sector, specifically in the US. And I always love to give like meta moments for this. Like one, I'm giving you like the data, but also like, guys, if you're not aware that this report happens every year, it's such an important tool as a fundraiser or as a new fundraiser or as an inspiring fundraiser to have in your toolbox. Every year, the Giving USA and the Giving Institute, in partnership with the Lilly School of Philanthropy, put together this really important report that starts really having us be able to take a much more comprehensive look at where the contributions specifically for US nonprofits are coming from. And in 2022, we, in this method of how we're capturing data, brought in over $499 billion in philanthropic dollars. Just philanthropic dollars for US nonprofits. It's pretty impressive. And I have to say, while the number of total contributions keeps growing every year, this pie chart, for the most part, has stayed the same, but it has fluctuated over the last few years. And the areas that I want to take note on is foundation giving has increased substantially over the last few years, up to now at 21%, which is very good for us to see, considering everything that's happened with COVID and civil rights and global issues around the country. We want to make sure that we're really being collaborative with our foundations, and it's really good news to see that our foundations are starting to give at a higher percentage. But you can see that big piece of the pie chart on the right. It is the individuals. It's still around 64%. Over the last few years, it's fluctuated and been ultimately a little higher, closer to 70 and 71%. But because foundations have really increased their giving, it's just skewed it. But it's still over $300 billion a year, folks, from individuals. Okay. And that's while this is one piece of data and one report that we want you to see, it's still significant to really, my takeaway for you is whether your pie chart looks like this or not at your org, that individual giving is something that everyone should be, in my opinion, incorporating into your fundraising program and strategy, because the people are generous and there are a lot of benefits to getting more folks engaged and involved in your organizations.
Krista, real quick, Alexandra was wondering if you could clarify which of these contributions are coming from church and or religious organizations.
Yeah, they're not in this report. So thanks for jumping in. And I saw that. There's a lot of different reports, and frankly, we need more ways to study this as well, because there's so much work happening on a community level, like churches, like giving circles, and like even GoFundMe sites, that this is not like kind of like, IRS documented contributions that we can pull from. So if you think about actually all those other sources of funds, we're even more giving and more altruistic in our communities. And those are certainly good areas to incorporate into your fundraising strategy. It just might not show up in this report. So it's a good question. I wonder if we could even do like a bigger dive to see what other reports are out there. And I'm going to shout out AFP, the Association for Fundraising Professionals, and other groups like that are dedicated to ensuring that fundraisers have their resources they need, might be engaging in other studies, as well as the Lilly School of Philanthropy. So great question. Important, what I'm going to show you today is no matter where the dollars are coming from or which report it's coming from, how important building relationships with these individuals in your communities can be for your organization. But mostly this is a great visual, and I just love seeing this slide because it's important to create stability through diversifying your funding. You can see that pie chart makes up how everything happens, and not even totaling how everything happens in the US. And so does this. It doesn't cover government funding in that last pie chart, which a lot of you may be really reliant on because of the type of work that you're doing. And that includes, local funds, state funds, and federal, right? And there are opportunities to get those funding opportunities through different avenues. Obviously, foundations, we've got tons of tools that we're not going to really talk about today, maybe a few here at Candid, but we have so many other courses that talk to you about how to really identify foundation funding and build relationships with foundations. And then there's your little stream of individual donors. And some of you, that may be the majority. It may look like the pie chart that we just showed. And some of you, you might be wanting to build that in. You want to be diversifying from just foundations and our government funding so that you can build more supporters into your organization and build in new revenue streams. So something to start thinking about as we kind of shift our mindset, okay, that's the landscape, but let's really talk about individuals today, is starting to, I'm not going to dive fully into the psychology, but there's some really neat studies out there around genuinely why people give to nonprofits and what is this kind of motivation for people to be generous. Frankly, I'll say I'm hopeful that my blog article is going to get posted in time because we are in mid-October now, but we are moving into giving season right now, where we know year after year people are just more generous as individuals around the holidays and year-end time. There are benefits, obviously, to tax benefits to being able to give charitably, but ultimately, and while we aren't sure, there's not one answer for why people give to nonprofits. Ultimately, what we do know is that the number one reason a donor decides to give is because they were asked. And we see this time and time again. We hear it from funders. I just had a whole panel of foundation funders come and talk about how important it is to develop these relationships with them and individuals in the community, because frankly, there's a lot of nonprofits out there and it's hard to figure out which ones to give to. So your job as a fundraiser, and maybe you're a volunteer, and maybe you are an aspiring fundraiser, are such an important part of building this program, this strategy, to ensure that you're asking. Every once in a while, we hear some magical stories about donors finding us and coming to us. And we want to continue to create more opportunities like that. I'm really proud to say that I'm on a team at Candid that is really looking to figure out how we make you more visible to donors so that they are being able to find you in the same way that you can find them. But it's so important that you're really cultivating these relationships and seeing how important it is to ask. So we've got some, tools here, and we believe that one of them is this cause selling model. There's a lot of models out there. This one's really based on relationship. So you can see the circle on the left. It's kind of that traditional cycle that it's the communications are have you heard that we need money? We need money. Give us money, please, please, please. Constant scrambling, kind of that scarcity mindset, grabbing at anything you can get, which might not really fit your values, and ultimately doesn't give you that security, you or your investors, that security in knowing that your organization is going to be able to continue to do its work, not just this year, but in the future. So the cause selling model, it helps to kind of shift that approach to having much more long-term success. That's where we start to see the difference between charity and philanthropy, when we really start building in these longer-term relationships. And it starts to communicate more here's what we do, here's why that affects you, or maybe that's important to you. Please support our cause through a donation. And here's where your support helped us accomplish that. That kind of full circle of communicating the importance, finding people that connect with your mission, because not everybody may, but there are plenty of people that will. asking for that donation, but then most importantly, communicating how it is working and what's it doing, because that's where some of your annual donations and those reoccurring gifts continue to come back. So it's just a nice little shift there to get away from that kind of unsure scramble feeling. As a reminder, you're going to get all these slides because there's a lot of details in here that in a webinar format, it's hard to really always absorb. But this is the more detail of the cycle, where it gives you basically 8 steps to help you move through the process. And it's not always so rigid. You might meet someone at a different phase, but I just love to show people visually in this one that if you can see, the ask isn't until 7. So a lot of times it's like, oh my gosh, Krista just told me that the number one reason that people give is because they asked, and I'm not sure that that's for me. I've never done it before. That feels weird. I know, I had it too. It wasn't something that was in my family necessarily. I'd never really experienced philanthropy in that way. And I had to be more comfortable with, well, this is my job to actually ask folks for money in a way that's going to like provide a lot of impact for the community that I'm passionate about. But there's so much more relationship building before that ask, folks. So once you actually get there, and folks that are on that have been doing this for a long time, you're going to let us know in chat. It actually becomes pretty easy. Once you've built all of those kind of relationships, you know you're asking the right person for the right thing, it becomes much easier. Okay, so that's the takeaway here. Some of the other details in the steps are here, and we have more in-depth resources that you can get into. And again, you can always follow up with me, but these are the details for an individual giving program that I really highly recommend. And this is how you're starting to think through your annual donors and maybe even moving folks into a major donor position. I've got a few other slides later that I think will address some of the questions that I see coming in. So let's go through these, and then I'll take a pause to see if there's any other kind of detailed questions. But the first phase is really prospecting and kind of pre-approach, gathering the information you need. So you need to know the donor's name, right? You need to meet somebody before asking them for money, which is important. And this might even start more kind of on a relationship building basis for your board. I love to think back to go, okay, well, how do I practice this? When I was a new fundraiser, I took a lot of workshops. Okay, now I've got all the tools, but how do I actually put this into practice? Well, I put it into practice with my board members. Hey, I'm working on building an individual donor program. I always worked at small organizations, so I was always the one that was building these programs. And I'd love to practice prospecting and gather this information and ultimately doing the fundraising with my board members. So finding the donor's name is important. Who do you want to practice with, or who do you want to ask? Gathering that information that you need to get to know them. I mean, their email address. Who do they know? Maybe they were referred by a board member or another funder. Then there's that approach piece, that kind of second phase where you start to introduce yourself to them. Hi, I'm Krista. I work for Candid. You ask them a lot of questions. It's a lot of relationship building goes both ways, and there's reciprocity, asking them what they're interested in, what their passions are, finding out if they're a good fit for your organization, and that is your organization a good fit for them. And then it starts to become more of maybe a telling the story. Maybe that's when a more formal presentation happens after several meetings. You might bring in others to help tell the story of the organization and the mission. That's where you might get some questions to your CEO, overcoming potential roadblocks to giving, any objections that they might have. Often this is also when people are like, wow, this is really great, but the timing's just not right, Krista. And I like to say, like, that's not a no. It might feel it a lot in the moment, but that's such a huge opportunity to get to know them better and better understand their timeline and when it is a better time to ask, or maybe get them involved more on a volunteer level if right now isn't the right time. And that's when we start to then formally get ready to ask the gift. Ask for the gift. By then you've had a better understanding of them and you know that it's right to ask for a gift. The process will allow you to actually figure out how much to ask for, which is often a big question I get from a lot of nonprofits. We all want $1 million, folks, believe me. But finding out and doing more research by getting to know them and through other methods to figure out how much to ask for is an important part of if the ask is going to be successful. And then finally, my favorite stage, honestly, is the stewardship. It's the follow-up. You're fostering loyalty with folks, and you can do this in a lot of different ways. Sometimes I even recommend starting with stewardship. So if today you're like, whoa, that whole phase approach seems overwhelming and I'm not sure I have a prospect list, you can go back to anyone that's involved in your organization right now and do stewardship. I'm talking volunteers, which includes board members. We're talking about past constituents that may have been graduates of your program. Building in how you're engaging your supporters is such an important part and basically first step for a lot of you that are new to this on how to ultimately build this annual giving program with individuals. So start thinking about like, who is it that I'd want to thank for being involved in my organization? Who is it that I'd love to get more involved? And who is it that we haven't met that we're like, gosh, they would just love our mission? Let's start really brainstorming how we might get them involved and put them through more of a, kind of individual donor prospecting process like this. Ultimately, that needs discovery in that middle of the approach there, and that cycle is so important. This cycle specifically, or any other relationship building, fundraising that you're doing, is not going to happen unless you're really kind of listening your way to the gift. Now, this doesn't have to be some weird power dynamic. We don't want this to feel inequitable in any way. This is really, you've got an amazing mission and organization that's doing really, really important work. And there are really neat individuals out there that want to contribute and get to know your organization and trust you with their money and their investment to be able to do this important work. So this kind of needs discovery on figuring out why they want to be involved, and if they're the right fit isn't tons of presentation. It is ultimately knowing your organization, but it's also really getting to know them to make sure that they're the right person to be involved with your organization as well. So if there's anything that you take away, it's really that relationship building that's at the heart of any individual donor program, because you're talking to a human, another human at the end of the day. Even if you're communicating just through email campaigns and text campaigns, there's still a human on the other side, right? That's going to get your email or your letter in the mail, and it's going to, want to make a donation decision based on what you're presenting to them. Some folks were kind of asking a little bit about like the structure. And so I wanted to make sure that I got this donor pyramid idea to you. It might look a little different in your organization. So this doesn't have to be like exactly what the numbers and ratio is for your organization. But oftentimes when we start building our individual giving program, and that's what I think a lot of the folks are curious about, we have more donors at the bottom. The number of donors are occasional donors, maybe folks that come to our events. This could even be ultimately volunteers that then start giving $20 a year to something, or buy one of your t-shirts at something. We tend to have more of these occasional donors at the bottom, right? So the number of these donors is higher at the bottom. And as we start getting more engagement, equaling more dollars, the number decreases, but sometimes the total for at the top can increase. So then we start really going into building reoccurring and annual donors. Once we've got them to come to something or make one donation, that's how we start to get to know them. Now we're going to start putting them at, would you like to make a reoccurring donation, or building in our annual donors? And that's going to be a larger gift. And then ultimately that's where we start prospecting for our major donors. It's really, really hard to think that without this kind of occasional donor, at the bottom, that you're going to be able to build a major donor program without that. And then the only other thing I'd add at the tippity top that we don't have time to get into today is planned giving. And you might have heard of that in the bequests pie chart earlier, that you saw that we've got 9% of contributions coming in from bequests. And it really is a wonderful career if you're interested in exploring career development in planned giving. And that's when you're talking to folks that they're coming to your events, they're giving annually, they're also a major donor for strategic initiatives, and you're also then talking to them about leaving something for you after they pass. And so that's a really nice way to start building in different sustainability models, but it takes a little while to build that, because especially for organizations that are fairly new, you want to really start thinking more donors with less dollars at the bottom, and then you can build from there. So now that we've kind of understood a little bit about like who these individual donors might be for us, it's important that you have a plan. And a lot of times, it can't just be we need money. It needs to be more detailed so that you can feel more confident. And what this is, it's a living document. I don't recommend that it's something that you write once and you kind of put it in a SharePoint folder and never look at it again. This is a living document that lays out your specific fundraising tasks and strategies. And most importantly, I'm going to call out here who's responsible for completing them, and then the time frame which they need to be accomplished. That way, you know, okay, we need to raise $1 million this year or $250,000 this year. And our plan is we're going to do that in these different ways. These people in our organization, including board members or other staff, are going to be helpful for that. And here's the time frame, so they're not waiting till the end of the year or the end of our fiscal budget, hoping that everything comes through. That we've kind of got a couple of different initiatives throughout the year that's going to help sustain and secure our funding. I heard someone go off mute. Is there anything urgent that I need to pause for, Erin?
We have just two questions that would be good if you kept them in mind as you were going through this. One, can this be applied to other types of philanthropic organizations like community-based organizations, people that are operating under a fiscal sponsorship, things like that? And just also some good general advice for finding donors that are a good fit for your organization, because I know that one of the things that you mentioned early on is that it's really important to make sure that you're not just looking for funding from anywhere, that you really want donors that whose values line up with your organizations.
Such a good question. Thank you so much. Yes, I think a lot of these principles can be applicable to other types of organizations instead of nonprofits, but this really is geared towards 501c3 nonprofits right now. Now, with that caveat, if you are fiscally sponsored, I think these are general principles that you'd want to utilize, but there might be a reason that your organization is set up to not be specifically a 501c3, and you want to just make sure that you're honoring what those, kind of bylaws, or if you don't have bylaws, agreements that were set up in formation of your organization first. So ultimately, yes, this is relationship building, and a lot of times that's why we call it cause selling. It's taken from sales, but done in a way that's communicating our cause in a very rich and relationship-based way. So a lot of people, I think, can benefit from that. I do like to say sometimes that I teach people how to build relationships. It equals fundraising, because I know the nonprofit sector really well and I know how to apply it. But ultimately, it is about relationship building. So maybe you could take some of these strategies and approaches and apply it to your organization best. Even if you're a nonprofit, your fundraising plan is not going to look the same as the other organization's fundraising plan. Especially when I started consulting, I realized, wow, you can have sample docs that help, but you really need to kind of do the work to dive in to make sure that these strategies and frankly, who's going to be responsible for them and what the time frame is for your org is very, customized to you and your organization. That might be also taking in mind capacity or different times of year that might be more impactful for your organization than another. For example, I was doing research earlier to find a food pantry locally because one of my roller skating groups wants to do a Thanksgiving drive, right? So there's probably organizations that are going to know that the type of organization that they are based on the time of year around Thanksgiving might need a fundraising plan that's going to include some of these strategies at different times, right? So you know your organization. When it comes to prospecting, I wish we had more time today to talk about it because it's kind of a big question. Ultimately, it's going also back to your plan and putting in some strategies and tactics. One, figuring out what works. So that includes some analysis on how you have already kind of recruited or invited in folks that are interested in your mission, like what's working. And then sometimes we can feel sort of risk adverse in our nonprofits, but it's really important that we're trying new things and finding ways to try new things. So if you know what works, maybe you also want to try something different this coming year to meet new people. Example, I recently moved to South Florida and I joined a Chamber of Commerce here. Maybe that's not the right fit for everyone, but finding new ways to build your network and find kind of, your people, the people that you think are going to be really, really, really into your work is a great way to find them, but also try new things and be able to say, okay, that was really great. We found these people, but they didn't end up being donors. They were more connectors to funders, or they were more a great place to meet potential board members at the chamber, but not necessarily donors. And then my final piece of advice on finding the right donor is having fundraising colleagues. Some of the best fundraising I did, and I continue to see, because I just was with one of our programs with fundraisers around the country last week, leaning on each other and making recommendations for each other. So not just building your network of donors or potential prospects, but also building your network of fundraising colleagues, either around the country, like something like we're doing now, or in your very local community by going to AFP, Association for Fundraising Professionals events, going to some of our nonprofit resource center partners events, going to a Meet the Funders panel, and really, meeting your colleagues. Because I think it's really important that we lean on each other and share our wisdom with each other. I see a few more questions come in. I want to get through a little bit of this plan strategy, and then I'm happy to answer everyone's questions today because I love all the engagement. One of the things that this plan might look like is we want it to kind of be a little more detailed. Again, this is something that you need to think through. But one way to do this is you have a goal to raise $10,000 from new and occasional donors. We did this a couple months ago, so you create your own timeline. And this is really to build that base, right? I'm thinking of you small organizations that are still really wanting to build your base. And you want to launch a virtual fundraising campaign to try to do that so that you can ultimately build more annual donors. And I love doing something like this early in the year for most organizations so that then you can utilize the results of this to then see if you can get some additional gifts at the end of the year for year-end fundraising. But you can do this any time of year. This is just an example. And so some of the ways that I would build out your plan is to have some action steps. The development staff, sometimes I had a staff and sometimes that was me, or maybe you're an executive director here. That might be you too. We'll research potential prospects and design a virtual campaign, right? Sometimes reaching potential prospects is really getting into your own data list. We often will take emails for newsletters and not think of them as potential donors for things. We might not be collecting contact information when we're doing community events or, book drives or things like that, and starting to think through how are we going to actually build prospects that care about our organization. And then there are ways that you can actually pay for lists if that's something that you want to experiment with as well. You just want to really kind of see how targeted you can get with that. And be mindful of the cost. So you want to design this virtual campaign, you put a timeline on it, you get board and staff involved in seeing if they can make any connections. You will get development staff involved to review and update your Candid profile, which I'll talk a little bit about later, but I love to put a plug in for that anytime you do a campaign. And then ultimately you'll launch the campaign and engage and solicit your prospects. We've got a whole Excel spreadsheet for you to take with you that you can kind of build your own. So let me just see. Yeah, this is the homework. So I wanted to stop my share, walk through what this might look like for you. And then I'm going to get back to some of your questions. This is a great way to start. So this page, it's a little small. Let's see if I can zoom in. Whoops. This page is just a really easy thing for you to jump into on your own. That's too small. Where it allows you to kind of assess your assets, right? So we have this table where you can think through, okay, well, how are you doing in some of these areas? We filled it in for you, but you want to look through your different revenue streams. We gave you an idea earlier about what some of those revenue streams might be: foundations, government funding, individuals. But for this specific workshop, we're talking about individuals. So you might even break that down a little more. New and occasional donors. Do you have event participants? Do you have recurring and annual donors? Do you have major donors? Do you have planned giving prospects? Do you have volunteers? You want to really take some time as you're putting your plan together to have a real clear understanding on if you're on target with some of these constituents, if there's a little caution that's needed and like, wow, we haven't really been thinking about that, or if it really needs attention. Look, if you're not ready for a major donor program, don't put it on this. You don't need a whole column of needs attention because you're not there yet. But starting to think through who you already have and assess your kind of strengths for revenue stream. You could add a whole column here for foundations and government funding as well to build out your plan. So this is just to help you get a sense of where you're at. And then what we have is a whole filled out plan. I just gave you the high level in the PowerPoint deck there. We have a whole filled out plan on how you can see who the constituency is, what the goal is, some potential strategies, timeframes, identifying persons responsible, how do you measure the success, which is really important. And then we've got some ideas on kind of like some next steps to help you chart out your plan. And it kind of goes down this way. And then finally, we gave you a complete blank worksheet so that you can go ahead and download this and use this as a potential kind of approach for your plan. It does not need to look like this at all. But when I was a new fundraiser, I was really searching for something, a template like this that I could use to build something. Yours might even be a Word format. So there's a lot of different ways to showcase, how you can build your plan. But this is one way to approach it. Okay, I'm going to switch back to the deck. Oops. And I'm going to take some more questions, Erin.
Excellent. So right off the bat, I know that we have a couple of people that are calling in from outside the US today.
Okay.
So do you have any experience or tips on international giving?
Yeah, that's not our like real great wheelhouse here at Candid. I do think, and so thank you all for coming here. I do think these tips and tactics around relationship building, around creating a fundraising plan are universal, no matter what, whether you're an actual 501c3. I mean, I had a small business. We needed a business development plan too, right? We needed a plan on how we were going to build relationships in the community to bring in more customers. So some of these techniques aren't necessarily just unique to our nonprofit sector in the US, but again, you need to adjust it. Just like if you're not a nonprofit and you're a fiscally sponsored org, you just need to take some of these kind of tips and adjust them. I'd love in the chat side, if anyone does have specific experience doing fundraising internationally, to share your ideas with us, because my knowledge is just my knowledge. And if other folks are doing this, please share your tips. But ultimately it is having a plan, knowing what your goals are, putting some tactics together, and then evaluating it as you go based on building relationships that are going to be right for your organization.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Krista. And then Paula has a question because one of the things that you did mention was that the fundraising plan needs to be a living document. She wanted to know how you can fold that into the overall strategic plan for the organization.
That's a great idea. It's a great question. The strategic plan needs to be much more high level, much more thinking through how the organization is going to accomplish its mission and vision, but you don't necessarily want a 50-year plan for that. And some of us, we hope that we could maybe close our organizations one day too. So it doesn't need to be long-term. It needs to be, how are we going to accomplish our goals over the next few years? And it's not necessarily focused on fundraising. The fundraising is going to take more into tactics. Okay, well, in order for us to accomplish our goals related to our mission and vision, we want to do X, Y, and Z programming and projects. And in order to do that, we're going to need to raise funds, and here's how many, or here's how much. And then that's where the development or the fundraising plan starts being created, is built off of what you need to raise money for. And the strategic plan should help you figure that out. It might not get into granulars around programs. That might be a whole different planning process for if you're a larger organization, you actually have a programming team. So here's my example. I worked with a theater company for many years in San Diego, and it was always one of these push or pull situations where they knew what the vision of the organization was and the type of theater that they wanted to do. And then every year the artistic team came together and said, okay, this year it's really important that we focus on diverse voices within current events. So we want to do 5 shows with these topics related to it. And here's the budget for each show. Well, what would happen is they would get really excited about the artistic side and drop the fundraising budget on the fundraising team. And now the fundraising team's going, I don't think we can raise 5 million. We didn't raise 5 million last year, but gosh, this work sounds so important. So that's where you really want to start kind of building together. Once you have that, North Star or plan of where the strategy for the organization is moving, it still needs to be a collaborative effort to figure out with the fundraising team and all the other teams if what the fundraising budget that's set is actually realistic. Okay. And yes, it's okay to have something that's aspirational, but let's be real. Okay. We don't want to set an organization or any of our constituents that we're trying to serve up for any kind of opportunity that we're not going to be able to more successfully meet our goal. So I'm all about setting SMART goals that are very realistic for an organization. And that is usually based on what you did in the past. So a lot of times our job as fundraisers is kind of like data analysis people, geeks like myself. I got really into like numbers and budgets because I knew that that was such an important part of being a good fundraiser, is knowing these how to put together budgets and being able to make a case through numbers in addition to narrative. So looking back right now, if you're like, where do I start in putting this draft plan together? I've got all these good ideas. I meet people every day that have good ideas that would love some money. Go back. What has worked? What did you raise from individuals last year? That's what I want to know. Like, that would be my first question. How much do you know? Okay, 10 people gave us $100. If I can tell you, if someone gave you $100, they can give you $1,000. Okay, you might not be their top choice, but you could build to that. If someone writes you a random $1,000 check, which our theater company had that, we had a $1,000 donation come in online randomly one day, and we were all like, what do we do? So we all worked together to make sure that we reached out to the person, set up a coffee date, and really better understood how they heard about us and how else they wanted to be involved. And we ended up asking them for, I think, $50,000 in a few months. So you start to see folks, giving a little to develop a relationship with you. And if you're not taking the time to really see that effort and cultivate the folks that are already giving and getting involved, then it's going to be hard to invite new folks in.
Excellent. And that actually is a great segue into our last question before we start talking about Candid profiles some more. Sue says that they just started a position in major gifts, and they'd like to start surveying their donors. And we're wondering kind of when is the best time to do that and how frequently it should be done, and any other advice you have about surveying donors.
Yay. Oh, love this question. I've always said that a major gifts officer is a very special person to an organization. If we can get to the point where everyone gets a major gift officer, then that's a very exciting stage for the organization. So congratulations, Sue, on having that role. I don't think there's a better time to start now. Start now. Knowing, because I know every year and do a lot of kind of communications and thought leadership around year-end giving, I can tell you right now, we're going into giving season. I would want to know who your potential donors are sooner than later. Just because you might have some opportunities before the year ends to make some exciting asks. And even if not, maybe there's a stewardship event at the holidays. One of my organizations, I was building a major gifts program after really building up our individual giving program over the years. And I brought back an old event at the holidays. It was from one of our founders. It was a holiday tea with wreaths, and it was just something that these donors used to love, and we stopped doing it. And I brought back this event, and it was not a fundraiser. It was a time of year to get all of our donors and our founders' friends, basically, that helped us start our organization and was sustaining us through the years. It's really time to just bring them together, say thank you, give them some, kind of network opportunities. It gave us an opportunity to tell them what we had worked on throughout the year and what was ahead. And I would always leave with checks in my hand. So again, it wasn't a fundraising event, but they were so engaged and loved it so much. So even doing some of these kind of more stewardship events with some of your existing donors to get to know them might be a soft way. And then you can say, oh, I'd love to follow up with you and get coffee and start really building that major donor list. And on the kind of not so relationship external side, it's looking at all of your reports and really getting like, I would want for you, like at least the last 3 years, if not the last 5 years of giving by name. I would want to see, did Miss Rodriguez, how much did Miss Rodriguez give every year for the last 3 to 5 years? And when, so I could start seeing when do they give, how much have they've given, so we can start building in some more major giving asks. And I don't think a survey, just a blanket survey, is not a bad idea. I recommend, when you're thinking about large gifts, thinking about higher touch. And so often calling or even having board members call to just establish relationship can be really valuable. And then if you hear from somebody, please don't invite me to events. Please don't call me. Never thank me again, which I've never heard. And of all the times that I've called people to thank them, then you can update their record. But often the higher touch or even sending a card in the mail might be a great way to really get feedback from them if you're able to do that capacity wise. Very exciting to hear that that's happening. Basically, this profile is free. That's my favorite part. A lot of this stuff is free. We work on a really cool team where we get to tell you all the free stuff. It goes beyond the IRS data, which is important to individual donors because they really want to be able to do their due diligence and research just like foundations. And most importantly for you to know is it does that by you're sharing the most up-to-date information on your organization for free in a place that we know donors are going to on a regular basis. Okay, so it's all coming from you. And we're able to do that through, these are not grades. These are seals of transparency based on you giving us more information to share with the public, right? So bronze, everybody that has your seal, now I want to start testing and seeing if you know what seal you have. But the bronze is the most basic, and you all could do this in 5 minutes. Okay, so please, if you don't know about this, put it on your list. It's your basic information so that donors know where to find you. And we are working with more and more entities and communities to be able to get this information in front of potential donors for you, like I was saying earlier. So don't miss out on this opportunity. Silver, I would say that should be your goal over the next year. If you don't have it, this is where you get to share program information, branding details. If you have a cool video, cool. If not, some images and your logo, so that it can really be like clear when people land on this profile page that it's you. And this helps people really guide their funding decisions because they want to know that they're contributing not just to a mission statement, but to the programs that you're running. And my goal for everyone, even if you can't do it by year end, but that's my goal, is that you all have gold. It is easy to attain, but it does take a little more work to make sure that you're uploading your financial details and you're also giving us your leadership information so that we can share your demographics and share more support and trust for your organization. This is exactly the kind of thing that individual donors, and really of a lot of different sizes, we're not just talking about major donors here, are interested in seeing before they're investing these days. It's almost like they're searching for you and trying to find the right fit for you. So be confident in sharing this information. And then finally, platinum, maybe you're not there organization life cycle wise, maybe some of you are, so yay, but this is where you start sharing your strategic plan that someone was asking about, and then progress towards that. This is where You've got some more, years of evaluating the work that you've been doing and the impact that you're able to make. And this obviously is a great look, but it takes a little longer to be able to build that over the years to be able to demonstrate impact. So something to consider and put on your potential list in the future. And I wanted to let you know that there's this third-party study, and that we were seeing that it turns out that transparency pays off. Like, I know, because I've been doing this work with individual donors for so long, that, the more trustworthy and transparent information is. I mean, we are part of the public sector. The reason we exist is because we're saying that this is public dollars and we need to be really responsible for it. But we're seeing now with actually the seals out in the market, and you all are filling them out, that year over year, more nonprofits are raising more money with their seal. And it's just because more people are utilizing it to cross-reference before making funding decisions. So you'll get access to this little video that's like super easy. You basically just go in and fill out your information. The reason there's a little bit of lag time is because we don't want other people that don't work for your organization to fill out your profile. So we just like to make sure that it's you, but it's super easy to do that. And once you have that, you as a fundraiser, I always saw my role as the fundraiser of like making sure that it was done, but I wasn't necessarily the one that was like writing everything. It was an important thing that I got programs involved and finance involved, and ultimately, the CEO or the board to sign off on it, so that we all knew how we were communicating ourselves visibly online. Okay, do we have questions about the profile?
I've been answering a few in chat.
Okay.
But just kind of generally around some of the logistics questions, I actually recommend that people reach out to our online librarian team, which is onlinelibrarian@candid.org. So they are an awesome resource. There are actual people there, so they're not robots. I think that we've mostly covered the questions that we've gotten about Candid profiles.
Thank you. There was one slide, Erin, that I didn't see in here that I wanted to share with you all too. And here's the Help Center. And yes, +1 to our online librarians that are actual humans and are so smart and answer so many questions all day. It amazes me. There's another slide here that your profiles are really being utilized by a lot of our other tech partners. Okay, so Facebook fundraising is pulling from your GuideStar or your Candid profile information. So for example, if in your plan, you're like, you know what, I want to try to find new folks through a Facebook fundraising campaign, and see if that's either a peer-to-peer thing where we get some, friends of friends to fundraise for their birthday for our nonprofit. All of that information that people are going to see through Facebook fundraising is going to be powered by your Candid profile. That's just one of them. There are donor advised funds. I love this program. We have staff that are working on this. There are donor advised funds groups out there that you won't be able to really find them other than like you meet them. But a lot of community foundations or other like investment portfolios like Fidelity Charitable, they also, all of those folks that are working to manage people's money and make philanthropic recommendations all have access to the profiles as well. So that's where we start seeing some really exciting either anonymous or leads come in, because people are using the profiles as a search engine for organizations that they want to give to. And I did a training several years ago, no, it's like 2 years ago, for some organizations in the Bay Area in San Francisco. Had a really, involved executive director on a very similar workshop like this. And she said, Krista, I know I needed to do it, but I'm a busy executive and I keep forgetting. And I'm like, please take the 5 minutes and get your gold seal. Maybe it's 15. She did. And within 2 weeks, she got a $250,000 unsolicited anonymous check from a donor advised fund at a local community foundation. And she called me and was like, I know that it's because I filled out my profile. We wouldn't have been searchable to these program officers otherwise. Listen, that's not what you put in your development plan. You don't put in your fundraising plan, wait for money to fall from the sky. But you do put in it that you update your profile on an annual basis. and specifically before year-end giving season so that people can find you. And there's a whole shareable link that you can use to get out in your year-end giving campaigns and really put yourself in this beautiful free profile that's most up to date in front of a lot of your donors. So it's just one of those like amazing tools that we have that I get very excited about telling people about, clearly. So a lot of things are powering your profile. There was another question that I wanted to answer about individual giving. Did I see it in the chat maybe?
I have seen a couple of follow-up questions about surveys coming in the chat. Jacqueline was wondering what type of questions you should be asking your donors. And also just like any tips on obtaining more contact information from people that have donated. Maybe you have an address for them, but you don't have an email address, or vice versa.
Yeah, it's such a good point. That's why the more you know your list, the better, really. So if there's like a piece of homework, it's before, and of course, we're going to give you access to the plan docs, but it's really getting to know your list better so that you can even build out the strategies. Like, Chris's strategy for this online virtual fundraising campaign is a good one, but who do I even start with? It's knowing what your list's kind of assets are right now, really, and really having a clear sense of who's on there. Right, you could have a bunch of mailing addresses, but no emails. Don't do an email campaign yet, period. But I wouldn't know how to tell you that unless I knew what you were working with. And then you use the communication that you have for them to reach out. So in one of my organizations I worked for, I really didn't have a lot of email addresses. I was inheriting a list of donors that it was mailing addresses, but that hadn't really been communicated to in a while. So I also had a feeling that it wasn't up to date. But so I just started sending postcards. I was stuff that was a little more inexpensive. Want to make sure that your contact information is up to date. If I had a phone number, I started making calls. We sent invitations to events to try to get people out. And then simultaneously, while I was really, really trying to re-engage our historical donors, I was also building new methods to bring in new donors through new networks. You could also consider nonprofit collaborations, folks, when you're like, how do I meet new people? During COVID, one of this food organization that did a lot of really great work with kind of farming and urban gardens, collaborated with a cooking organization, and they did a collaborative fundraising event, actually, and it was virtual, where they worked together. They pulled both of their lists. So I got to know about another cooking organization through the food organization that I'm on. They shared both of their missions. They ended up doing a virtual cooking class, and we all gave money to attend. And I think they asked for more money at the end. And now they've cultivated us by sharing lists and getting each other's email address and more contact information. So you might consider doing some like fun things like that, especially as the holidays are coming up, to collaborate with others. And just be really, I think the most important thing about that is be very ethical with people's contact information. Okay. Like being very upfront that you're not like taking someone's contact information. You're trying to find donors that are going to be really interested in you, not just any email or any mailing address. So being really thoughtful and intentional about how you might collaborate with others on that is a good way to start.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Krista. I think that is just about all of our questions. I responded to some of them, in a written way rather than asking them out loud, but I hope we covered everything. And like we mentioned before, if you have any kind of burning questions after this, or some questions that are more specific to your nonprofit, please feel free to reach out to our online librarian team at onlinelibrarian@candid.org.
Thank you, Erin, so much. And thank you all for your participation. Excellent questions. There's my email. please, please, please fill out the survey. I love to read it. My supervisor loves to read it. We all love reading them. So I really appreciate it. And I really love opportunities that we can improve. So please share that with us, or any other topics. If you want more topics on diving more into prospecting, I would love to talk more about that. So please, please, please let us know. And I just want to thank you all for all the time that you've put into today and doing your work. We've got some more free events that you can follow up with. We dive into deeper fundraising planning in this other workshop on our website. And we also have our newsletter that you can follow us, that will also keep you up to date on any other free and upcoming trainings. Wow, I feel so grateful to have spent this time with you all today. And I look forward to seeing you at a future webinar, or maybe in the community. Have a great day.